In the spring of 1943, the Second World War had reached a dangerous turning point. The Allies were finally gaining momentum, but Europe itself was still firmly locked behind German defenses. Every coastline was watched. Every likely invasion route was fortified. And Adolf Hitler, increasingly paranoid and obsessed with predicting his enemy's next move, believed the Allies were preparing something big. British and American commanders knew that if Germany guessed correctly where the invasion would come, the result would be catastrophic. Tens of thousands of soldiers could be killed before they ever left the beaches. The problem wasn't firepower, it was expectation. The Germans were waiting. And to break that expectation, British intelligence approved one of the strangest and most unsettling plans in military history. They would not send spies. They would not transmit false radio messages, and they would not leak information through diplomats. Instead, they would send a dead man carrying a secret so convincing that even Hitler himself would believe it. The obvious Allied target was the island of Sicily. Sitting in the center of the Mediterranean, Sicily was the gateway into mainland Europe, and both sides understood its importance. Whoever controlled the island controlled supply routes, airfields, and the next phase of the war. The problem was that Sicily was too obvious. German intelligence expected an invasion there and had reinforced the island accordingly. Hitler personally ordered defenses strengthened, convinced that Sicily would be the Allies' next move. British planners understood that attacking a fully prepared enemy would mean enormous casualties. They needed Germany to look elsewhere, not briefly, not half-heartedly, but with full confidence. This deception had to redirect entire armies. And most importantly, it had to reach the very top of the Nazi command structure. Convincing field officers wouldn't be enough. The lie had to fool Adolf Hitler himself. Within Britain's intelligence services, a radical idea resurfaced, one that bordered on the unthinkable. Instead of feeding the Germans false information through spies or intercepted communications, the Allies would create a situation that appeared completely accidental. The Germans would not receive intelligence, they would discover it. A British officer would appear to have died at sea, the victim of a tragic aircraft accident. On his body would be secret documents suggesting the Allies planned to invade Greece and Sardinia instead of Sicily. The brilliance of the idea lay in its simplicity. A dead man could not lie. An accident carried no suspicion. And intelligence officers, trained to distrust everything, were far more likely to believe information they were never meant to find. Finding the right body was only the beginning. British intelligence needed to create an entirely believable human being. The man would be named Major William Martin of the Royal Marines. But a name and uniform were not enough. His pockets had to tell a story. He carried love letters from a fiancée, written in an affectionate, slightly annoyed tone. A photograph of her was tucked into his wallet. There were receipts for mundane purchases, keys that opened nothing, and even a letter from his bank about an overdraft. These details mattered because real lives are messy. Nothing about Major Martin could feel staged. Every item was chosen to withstand close inspection by suspicious German intelligence officers, who would analyze every detail. The false invasion plans were crafted with extreme care. They were written as private correspondence between senior Allied officers, not as formal reports. The letters discussed Greece and Sardinia as upcoming targets while mentioning Sicily only as a diversion. The tone was casual, even slightly careless, exactly how real officers might write when they believed their words were secure. British planners knew the Germans would scrutinize every phrase, so the documents included minor inconsistencies and offhand remarks that made them feel authentic. This wasn't just forgery, it was psychological manipulation, designed to exploit how intelligence analysts wanted to interpret information. Under cover of darkness, the body of Major Martin was sealed inside a container and transported by submarine toward the coast of Spain. Spain was officially neutral, but British intelligence knew that Spanish officials often passed sensitive information directly to Germany. The body was released into the sea in a carefully chosen location, ensuring it would wash ashore naturally. There were no witnesses, no dramatic gestures. Once the container slipped beneath the waves, the operation was completely out of British hands. From that moment on, success depended entirely on whether the Germans would believe the story they were about to uncover. Once the documents reached German intelligence, They were examined with extreme care. Analysts compared signatures, verified names, and studied the tone of the letters line by line. Everything checked out. There were no obvious inconsistencies, no signs of fabrication. To the Germans, this was not planted intelligence, it was stolen truth. The information moved quickly up the chain of command, reaching senior planners and eventually Adolf Hitler himself, and Hitler, already convinced the Allies would strike through the Balkans, accepted the documents as confirmation of his own instincts. Orders were issued almost immediately. German divisions were pulled away from Sicily and redeployed toward Greece. Aircraft were reassigned. Defensive priorities shifted across the Mediterranean. All of it was done quietly, confidently, and decisively, guided entirely by a story carried by a man who had never existed. When Allied forces finally landed on Sicily on July 10, 1943, the results of the deception became clear almost immediately. While resistance was still fierce in places, German defenses were fragmented and uneven. Units that should have been waiting were missing. Reinforcements arrived late or not at all. Commanders on the ground were forced to improvise, struggling to respond to an invasion they believed was only a diversion. The fighting was brutal, but it was not the massacre many Allied planners had feared. Operation Mincemeat had done exactly what it was designed to do. It had bought time, space, and surprise. Thousands of soldiers survived the landing because German forces were watching the wrong coastline, preparing for an attack that would never come. As the campaign in Sicily unfolded, the success of Operation Mincemeat became undeniable. Allied commanders quietly acknowledged that the deception had altered the course of the invasion. Yet the operation itself remained classified, its true details known only to a small circle within British intelligence. Meanwhile, the man known as Major William Martin was buried in Spain with full military honors. A gravestone was placed, bearing the name of a man who had never lived, yet whose role in history was undeniable. The British government allowed the legend to stand, understanding that secrecy was still essential. For decades, the truth behind the operation remained hidden, even as its impact echoed through the remainder of the war. When the full story of Operation Mincemeat was finally revealed years later, it forced historians to reconsider how wars are truly won. This was not a victory achieved through overwhelming firepower or superior number. It was a victory achieved through imagination, patience, and an understanding of human psychology. A single carefully constructed lie reshaped German strategy, weakened enemy defenses, and helped open the path into occupied Europe. In a war defined by destruction on an unimaginable scale, one of its most decisive moments came not from violence but from deception. And it all depended on a dead man, sent into history with a secret powerful enough to change the course of the Second World War.